It's a pleasure to have you in.
It's a pleasure to be on the program this morning.
Indeed. Of course, we have seen a plethora of reforms from this administration since 2023 to create some sort of macroeconomic stability. Have we seen the desired results? And if so, if not, why not?
Well, in 2023, the current administration, they took a bold step around subsidy removal and also the harmonization of the FX window. Of course, they had a backlash on the back of that decision, but they are acting support from some quarters around that decision. But when you look at what has happened aftermath, we've not really seen the full dividend of that of those decisions that we're taking. And that's one thing about economic policy, and that's why they will always tell you that all things being equal. On the back of IMF, such decisions should have started yielding results. And that's one of the reasons why they were surprised when they weren't seeing any great impact on the standard of living of the populace. But one of the things that we also need to look at is that aside actually putting policies in place, there are some other exogenous factors that you have not actually factored in that initial. But when they actually crop up, the government needs to actually quickly rise up to the occasion and actually find a way around it. And one of the issues is that when you look at the level of food inflation in Nigeria, it also calls question, why would a country like Nigeria that has the capacity to produce and actually feed its populace actually going through this level of food inflation? But when you also look at the crisis happening in the food producing states, communal crises, farmer crises, and also insecurity in the fact that farmers cannot actually access their farmland. Then you also now answer the question that these are some of the reasons why we are not seeing the results.
Right.
And also when you look at the fact that cost of transporting goods from these food producing states to the urban area where people would need to consume, of course, the roads are bad, so it makes it actually difficult for you to actually convey goods from those places to the marketplace. And these are some of the reasons why we are not seeing results. So the government has been taking the policy, but they also need to actually work it to the end.
Yes, right. Intervention on all fronts. So they've gotten the policy right from what you're saying, but there are other areas like insecurity that needs to be addressed. And while a lot of people may want to put the initiative fully on the government to intervene, there are those who also say the private sector have their role to play. So what role would you say the private sector has played in perhaps easing the burden? There are conversations around credit facility and so on and so forth. So let us into a bit on the role of the private sector in what's happening in the economy in Nigeria.
Yeah, truly, a lot of people are right by saying that because to develop any economy, the real responsibility actually is on the private sector. But one thing that the government needs to do for the private sector to be able to actually carry out their duty is to provide an enabling environment. In a situation whereby there's huge insecurity in the country, in a situation whereby people barely can actually feed, how do you think the private sector can actually come in this kind of environment to actually perform their duty? One of the duty of the private sector is to come in, establish business, actually creating employment, and on the part of financial institution as well, granting loans to actually help to actually develop businesses. But when the environment is not conducive, you find it very difficult to actually see most of the private sector coming to actually invest in the market. A lot of foreign investors that wanted to come to Nigeria and put their money in the Nigerian environment. A lot of them are seeing a lot of opportunity in this country. But when they look at it, that is the economy conducive enough for them to actually bring in their capital, then it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem in that regard. So the government needs to create that enabling environment for some of the private organizations to actually perform their duty. Banks will be ready to actually lend money to the economy. But when they know that if you lend money in a situation whereby it looks as if the economy is tough, and you think that the company you are lending money to, you may not even be able to break even. So the end goal is that you may not even be able to actually get your money back.
Right.
So what it will bring to banks is that they would rather want to actually stay calm at such a time like this, while waiting for the right time for them to be able to actually push their form into the economy.
So the ball's back in the court of the government. But coming to what the IMF actually said, they've highlighted the need for that social welfare, development spending. We know that when some of these reforms were being rolled out, there were promises of this facility, this intervention, that intervention. What's your assessment? How effective have those interventions been, if they have played out at all?
Well, to a great extent, the government has done their part on the NELF, that's funding for education, where they actually grant loans to students, and that looks more like a great success. But the other hand, when you now start looking at the other area, the area of funding to the agricultural sector, I don't think that we have been seeing much impact of that on the economy. And the government needs to actually rise up and actually do more in this regard. And also, it's not about only giving funding to the agricultural sector. You need to actually tutor them best on how best they can actually be more productive. Aside the fact that there's no funding for farmers, the seedling is also a factor. And when you compare the level of seed that we actually put in the ground in Nigeria, with all the other ones that are actually done in other parts of the world, where they actually get great harvest, you find out that seedling is bad. So the government needs to actually work around that and see how best they can actually improve on that. And also, the government actually moved from more like traditional farming to more like an advanced mechanized farming. And also, the government also needs to create a room where they can actually serve as off-taker to some of these farmers. There are many farmers that are out there. They go to farm, they farm. At the end of the day, so after harvesting, to get this thing to get to the market, they find it very difficult. Right. And at the end of finding out that most of these the harvest at the end of the day, there's nothing to write home about. So the government needs to actually now become an off-taker to some of these farmers. So what they will do is that you farm, will take it off from you, will buy it directly from you. And this is more like the model that were run that were run in the olden days, when you have the cocoa merchant. So they go into the interior to actually buy this cocoa harvest from farmers. So and they ended up being the ones selling it to the manufacturer.
From what you're saying, we're talking about a more intentional, strategic approach than just a handout from the government. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying. But and hopefully,
the government needs to be more strategic around it.
And hopefully we see that being done. Another key element highlighted by the IMF was the funding of deficits that happened in previous administration, tens of trillions of naira. They're lauding the fact that that has ended. How would you say that this has affected perhaps inflation control and fiscal discipline, the ending of that CBN financing of deficits?
Well, I will give kudos to the current CBN administrator. They've been doing a very great job. And when you look at it, they actually look into the government in the eyes and say the end has come to actually funding government directly. So what they have done is that they put an end to what happened in the last administration that led to over 22 trillion loan to the government by the central bank. And that is one of the things that led to the aggressive inflationary pressure that we saw, because that actually puts a lot of liquidity into the system. And that is what the current administrator is currently battling around, to actually control the inflationary pressure. And the decision to actually stop that, the ways and means funding to the government, I think is a very good one. And what it will do, it will help to actually mitigate inflationary pressure and also put a bit of stability on the valuation of naira. Because we noticed that the level of volatility that we saw during the last administration, when these ways and means funds were being pumped into the system, that put a lot of pressure on the currency. And we actually moved from around 200 and 195 levels to 360 to 450. And now we are around north of 1,500. So by actually putting an end to that, we actually reduce the pressure of that. And also we actually help the government to be more disciplined in their spending. Because one thing is about that if you don't have something to spend, you actually ensure that you are very, very disciplined with the one that you currently have on the table. And that is what the current government needs to actually work around. Whatever comes in from the revenue generated internally from oil proceeds, the government should work around that to actually use that to develop the economy and be more fiscal discipline.
Yes, I mean, you basically answered the next question, which was around, I mean, remember when these reforms were being rolled out, one of the messages was that we need to save money. And they said the money or the savings would be used for other things, more productive things. Are we saving that money, and where is those savings? Where are they going? What sectors? Is there any accountability in that regard of the savings from the removal of subsidies?
Yeah, I think the government needs to come out more transparent around this. We've been seeing the tax distribution has gone up aggressively. As at last week, the governments agreed that they are going to share 1.5 trillion among the 3 tiers of government. And this is more like 2 times or 3 times of what it used to be. So what is happening currently is that there are more money going into the hand of the state government, into the hand of the local government. So it means that what the government is trying to do is to bring government very close to the people. And I guess that's one of the reasons why the current government actually took the state government to court around local government autonomy. So because if the money gets directed to the local government authority, it is easier for the people to feel the impact than the money staying with the federal government and also the state government. So I feel that the government needs to be more transparent around this and be more explicit around it by stating that these are the savings that we have seen from actually removal of subsidy. And these are the projects that we are actually pushing this fund into. The government should actually work around infrastructural development. We've seen some actually happening already. The federal government actually kickstart many projects around road construction. And we actually appreciate that because what that would do is that it makes business activity more conducive in the country. So, but the government needs to take it a notch higher than this. Beyond road infrastructure, what are you doing on health system? Beyond health system, what are you doing to further develop the educational system? Beyond the educational system, what are you doing around the social welfareism of the populace? So the government needs to actually go beyond the infrastructural development and actually move into the social aspect of the economy.
All right.
So that people can feel the impact.
Obviously, from what you said, there's still so much more that needs to be done as a follow-up to some of the reforms of the past. But thank you so much for sharing them with us here. Oladipo Ajayi, Head of Fixed Income and FX at Chapel Hill Denham Securities. A pleasure having you join me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John, for having me this morning.